So, please.
And so now we'll show the same with the attack running as Giovanni pointed out on the DNSSEC aware browser.
In fact, somebody else just got it too, I think.
On the DNSSEC aware browser, going to the same page, you'll see when it gets up there.
You are safe.
That it was not affected by the hijack attack. The website still detected that in fact it was a DNSSEC aware browser coming to it. And so the falsified story is in fact not present. So this is a real life illustration done in real time with typical glitches that happen when you do real time demonstrations to show how straightforward it is to actually replace content in applications, and if done in a way that it's reasonably plausible, or as Olaf's illustration was, where it sits in the middle and then passes it on and delivers it, the user, the application, the human beings involved don't even know it occurred, and they believe they've gotten the valid and correct information, when indeed they have not. So this concludes the demonstration. We do have one more slide here just to illustrate how one particular page, and this actually was a page that was done about, I think, 3 years ago. The website that we looked at and collected, oops, get my machine to, okay. Get past the animation here so it comes up right. The CNN website, as most large complex websites, take a number of queries, and so a user sees a single page, they think, oh gee, just 1 or 2 DNS queries. That's a mapping of how many DNS queries and replies it took to actually fill that web page. It's close to 100 to fill that web page. And so any one of those, and in the case of the demonstration we just showed you, it was actually just one that we replaced. So you can have the website content almost exactly right and still have content replaced. So this gives you an idea, and each web page is different, and I've seen some that are a couple hundred queries. So in fact, that's an illustration of how real this actually is. Thank you. I don't know if we have time for any questions or comments, what the timing is, or we just move on. Okay, thank you.
I just have one comment or statement about this. What you saw is not a defacement of the original website. So we didn't go to the original website and change the website. It's something that happens, in the middle. So the original website didn't notice,
That's right.
any strange activity. So now we move to Doug Mon from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and he will talk about the U.S. program on the DNSSEC.
As Steve mentioned, this is a process that has been going on for a decade, almost 2 decades. There are many, many people who have been carrying the torch for DNSSEC for quite some time. I am not one of those people. I was an absolute skeptic. I did not believe that DNSSEC was going to work or was even necessary. And I was wrong. That is a profound and genuinely wonderful thing for an engineer to realize, that a whole set of assumptions was just mistaken. This technology, this DNSSEC technology, operates on a layer, frankly, that doesn't exist anywhere else. I come from the security world. I do not come from the DNS world. When I actually came into DNS, I saw levels of cooperation I frankly didn't think human beings were capable of. It takes DNS work at all, but it does work. It works so amazingly. When I was in a room once and I asked 200 engineers, how many of you depend on DNS? And 2 hands go up. Then I say, how many of you, if a host name is not resolved, have your software break? And 198 hands go up. This technology, this cooperation, this effort, even independent of DNSSEC, enables the basic functionality of the internet. But we in security, we haven't been able to use this technology. We haven't been able to use this technology because it hasn't been secure. And I'll be honest, we've been struggling. We in security have made a lot of promises about a lot of technologies and spent a lot of money deploying them, and frankly, they haven't all worked as well as we'd liked. I am so appreciative at the work of ICANN, of the work of .org, of the work of Steve Crocker, of everyone to bring to security the level of cross-organizational functionality that the rest of the information technology industry has been able to enjoy for the last 25 years.
Wait a second for Massimo to
Yeah.
pull up some slides.
The video that just we showed was recorded last week at the ICANN 38, the 38th International Meeting in Brussels, and it was during the DNSSEC press conference, I think, on Wednesday morning. And as we said before, Dan Kaminsky is the media star who brought, the DNS cache poisoning vulnerability at the attention of the media. What happened before with the videos was just a demonstration that all our experts here didn't accept, to show you something that was pre-programmed. They wanted to give you a real demo that you could also follow using your laptops. So sometimes when you do it, live, there can be some problems. And the problems were only with video recognition and not with the DNSSEC demonstration itself. It happens. But anyway, thank you very much, Russ, and all the others for the efforts to make it moving despite the problems. Doug.
Great. Buongiorno. I'd like to thank Post Italiana for hosting us here for this important conference. My name is Douglas Maughan. I'm a program manager in the Department of Homeland Security within the U.S. government, and have been managing what is called the DNSSEC deployment initiative for the last 6 years within the Department of Homeland Security. If you're not familiar with some of the activities within the DNS security, a lot of it in the U.S. came from a national strategy document that was produced in 2003, released out of the Bush White House, and specifically called for activity in securing internet infrastructure. In particular, talks about IPv6, DNS, and BGP, Border Gateway Protocol. As far as a research program, we chose to focus on the DNS. At the time, a little bit, if we go back to Olaf's opening remarks, if you look at the time frame back in 2003, not a lot of activity in trying to secure the DNS. So in 2004, we initiated this program and have been working towards that in the last 6 years. The performers in the program include a company called Shinkuro. Its CEO is Dr. Steve Crocker, who's here with us today. Sparta and the demonstration you just saw from our Sparta team, and NIST, you'll hear from Doug Montgomery from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Each of them has a role to play Shinkuro has been very focused in outreach and working with the international community. Sparta has developed a lot of tools. You'll hear from Russ later in the program of the large number of DNSSEC tools that have been produced by Sparta, open source and available off of our website, and allow any developers to use those tools to make new applications and new products DNSSEC aware. And last is working with NIST in building measurement and evaluation tools. They have something called the Secure Naming Infrastructure Pilot, which is a test bed allowing folks to test DNSSEC before actually doing it operationally. And NIST has been our front organization to help us in all of the standards activities, in particular within the U.S. government. So we initiated a number of activities in 2005, including a roadmap. It's available off of our program website. It was updated in 2007. I'll talk about on the next slide exactly what that roadmap talks about. We've had numerous workshops such as this worldwide over the last 6 years. We're involved in a number of other pilots globally, and have really been trying to push DNS security over the last 6 years. We've also just recently upgraded our website to include a blog and a wiki, and apparently that wiki can be hacked and we can get false stories from Steve Crocker about world hunger. But most importantly for us is working with the U.S. government, or the .gov domain, to have the U.S. government take a leadership role in securing the internet, and specifically the DNS. So we have worked quite heavily in the U.S. government, and even we've struggled with progress there as well, but I'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of slides. And again, the next item is working with the vendors. So as Olaf talked about, we're seeing more and more products. Interesting, we have a conference that we've sponsored the last 2 years in Washington, D.C. This past year, there were actually 11 vendors that had DNSSEC products that are openly available in the marketplace. So from a position of 1 or 2, 3 years ago, we're now at a position where we're seeing a lot more products being developed and deployed. Our roadmap identified a number of things. First was remaining R&D. There are still things to work on in DNS security. It's not 100% done, and that was obviously evident by Dan Kaminsky's episode. We have been talking about software development and have funded actively some of the tools. You'll hear from Russ. We've been very focused on operational considerations. DNS is a global internet infrastructure. As such, very difficult to change the internet infrastructure overnight. So it does take a lot of work and a lot of people. As Olaf mentioned, the root will be signed next month. That's actually taken quite a bit of work, both inside the U.S. government as well as externally with the international partners. Working with other parts of the internet, registries, registrants, etc. As I mentioned, NIST is the measurement and evaluation. And last is our outreach and training. As Andrea mentioned, we'll be back in the fall to help you put on, to help them, the center, put on a training program in DNSSEC. So it is an interesting problem, the incremental deployment. It is a global ecosystem that needs to work together. As I mentioned with Shinkuro and Dr. Crocker, they've been actively involved in working with registries, registrars, ISPs, and enterprises. You'll hear a lot of the activities today have had some fingerprint of Shinkuro involvement. Let me move on to the U.S. government. So one of the things we did to ensure U.S. government participation was to work with the White House to get a memo out of the White House back in 2008. Fortunate for us, the Kaminsky attack happened the first week of August. This memo was already in the pipeline and came out 3 weeks later. Made it look like the government was really fast in its response. The truth was it took us about 2 years to get this memo approved through the government, and it has been key for the U.S. government moving forward in its deployment. All of this is mentioned here on this slide. Again, .gov was signed in '09, and we still only have about 30% maybe of the US .gov domains signed, and we're still working with folks in the White House to get that number up to work closer to 100. So let me just conclude by saying, I think you saw by the demonstration, the DNS still has vulnerabilities. We've also seen the more recent Google Aurora attack that had at its core DNS implications. Fixing DNS requires a global community. We've been working strongly with ICANN and the rest of the community for the last 6 years in trying to lead the initiative. There's certainly a customer pull needed, and I think the comments by Mr. Sarmi and Mr. Agosto at the beginning of the meeting shows a leadership by Posta Italiana as we try to push forward new applications and new security into their environment, and the importance for doing that. So hopefully by the end of the conference tomorrow, there'll be a much better understanding and a much better idea of the importance of DNSSEC and the need for customers. We still have plenty of work to do, but I'm certainly glad to have all of you here, and look forward to meeting you throughout the next day and a half.
Thank you, Doug, also for shrinking your speech and helping me with the agenda. Last but not least, now we have Mr. Steve Crocker. And Steve will talk about making the commitment, people, time, and money.
Oops. Let me take this opportunity to thank the many, many people who've helped bring this program together. We've been working for, I don't know, the past 2, 3, 4 months, I think, to put this together. And it's built on the rather dramatic level of support that Homeland Security and Doug Mound has provided since 2004, a tremendously foresighted and vigorous effort, oftentimes against opposition. Although now I think the story is pretty clear. So I want to thank Doug, and I want to thank everybody who's come to help put this on. I called in a number of personal favors, and I appreciate the support. I want to correct the record. I did not try to say that DNS was going to solve world hunger. I actually was focused on two much harder and more urgent problems. One is fixing the traffic problems in Rome, and the other is improving the quality of soccer play in various countries.
Hey! We don't need it.
Poor Sarah over here from Portugal is unhappy this morning, I'm afraid. Let me move on to the next slide there. So, oh, do I have control? I get control. Fantastic. So one of the things that we've been doing is tracking to the best that we can the adoption of DNSSEC across the world. This is a little bar chart on the adoption within the country code top-level domain community, .uk, .de, .nl.se, of course. And the blue bar on the bottom of each, the blue part of each bar is full operational capability. The green is partial operational capability. The orange is the number who have announced but not yet implemented, that committed to doing it. And yellow are the ones that are in experimental status. The sum total of all of those adds up to, I think, 36. There's actually quite a few more that we don't have data on. The singular event that is going to take place in the middle of next month, 2 weeks and a day from today, the signing of the root, is sending a sharp political signal around the world, and quite a few places have geared their plans, pushing them forward if they were not, and synchronizing if they were already in place, to take advantage of the fact that the root will be signed, and then we will see, I think, a number of top-level domains past that. We also have a number of generic top-level domains, and I'll show you a slide on that. All right. So here's a map. This is the status as of the end of March this year. The same color coding, blue is fully operational and so forth. And then I'm going to quickly flip through at 3-month intervals, except when I get to the end of this year, the next one will be a full year later. So you can see just barely, it's not too, here's for example, I'm going backwards and forwards. You see Japan and let's see what else is going on. Chile over on the left at the bottom. And here's Canada. This is a full year later. Actually, the progress is even better than it suggests there. The U.S. is in some state of signed now and will be fully operational. China is in an experimental status, but I don't have the quality of the information that I like to have before I put it on a chart. As I said, the route's going to be signed next month. Other top-level domains that are already signed: museum, gov, inside the U.S. government, org, .eu, .arpa, which is an infrastructure domain within the DNS, .cat, and coming soon, edu, info, net, com, which is the biggest, and will be signed early next year, and of course, .post. On the ISP side, we have Telia and Comcast that have taken leadership positions. In the university community, we have the American University community under .edu. We have SurfNet in the Netherlands, and I think others are coming around the world. So, as Olaf has emphasized, quite a lot of work has been done, and we're now past the initial stages. We've become fond in the last several weeks of quoting Winston Churchill's famous saying, "This is not the end, this is not even the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning." All of the spade work and the hard experiments and a lot of the learning curve has been taken care of. And the costs of that have already been accumulated. So there's been experimental deployment, there's been documentation, tools, procedures and statements of practice and organizational frameworks. The good news for everybody here is that there is a tremendous desire and eagerness to share that information and to help. So there is a community that exists, that is in place, and quite willingly. So it's not yet been commercialized like we did it, and now you have to pay a lot. The main aim is to be helpful. So the purpose of this whole workshop is to create awareness and to make it possible for those of you who are in decision positions to make the commitment and to allocate the resources and to help your organization shift toward moving forward with DNSSEC. As Andrea has mentioned a couple of times, there's a plan for a follow-up workshop that will bring the next layer of information that will provide specific information on how to implement, and there's, of course, plenty of resources available. So you might have thought that I was going to give you very specific information on what it was going to cost and how much time and so forth. We don't have any concrete information of that level of detail. It varies quite a lot. But the basic dimensions for planning process, for planning purposes, are people, time, and money. From a people point of view, there has to be a point of contact or a internal expert or manager or some combination, sometimes a whole team. From a time point of view, the major components of a schedule will involve planning, implementation, testing, deploying, and then after deployment, measuring and adjusting, and perhaps iteratively. The money is actually the easiest part of this. It doesn't take a whole lot in terms of resources. Most groups will choose to put in specialized hardware, but for small or modest operations, it can be done entirely in software. The hardware is now relatively inexpensive by comparison with major servers and so forth. And the other component here is that communication is necessary. communication with the people and other groups that you work with closely to provide services, with your customers, with comparable organizations outside, and of course, if anybody is paying your bills, then with your sponsors. So the message here is obviously to communicate early and to communicate often. How much, as I said, it varies quite a lot. It depends upon the size, visibility, sense of risk, and sense of confidence. To take two extremes, the quite excellent group in Sweden put in multiple years of planning and development and outreach. In contrast, the whole country of Namibia was lit up by one guy in a few weeks while he was recuperating from an operation, and decided that he'd spend his time reading the documentation and writing code. And so that's the way things are done in Africa, I think. So with that, I'll try to not make us any worse on schedule and turn things back over to Andrea.
Thank you very much. We started 15 minutes late. We ended 15 minutes late, so we can say we are on time. Thank you very much. I also have to thank Steve. He did an amazing job to keep here, to have all the speakers here, to work on this great agenda. And so thanks again, Steve. Now, before having our coffee break, I have just a small announcement. Today we are here to talk about DNSSEC, so we thought that